It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was micro failures, little glitches, and we reacted to them the way jittery addicts do. Saturday, 6:45 p.m. I was in my room. A lo-fi beat pulsed in my headphones. On my second monitor, a video was breaking down a new neural network model. On my main screen, I was texting in 3 different chats at once. The world felt dense, saturated, safe. Then the music in my headphones stuttered. You know that sound? Digital hiccup? A short metallic grind? A data packet got lost somewhere deep inside the cables. I frowned and hit refresh. The page loaded halfway. The text came up, but the images stayed gray rectangles. I tapped my fingers against the desk, irritated. Come on, I whispered. From the next room, I heard my father's voice, loud, demanding. Ellen, is your Wi-Fi working? My call keeps dropping. Yeah, it's lagging. My mom's muffled voice floated back. Probably the provider messing with something again. And then the network blinked one last time. Like a dying star, it threw out one final pulse of data and collapsed. Connection lost. DNS server not found. 404. Nothing. I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked inside an empty input box. And inside me, something strange and cold began to grow. It wasn't fear for the world. It was fear for me. Who am I if I can't send this message? Who needs me if I'm not online? I stepped into the hallway. Dad was already there. He looked ridiculous. Smartphone in one hand, the router's power cord in the other, yanked from the wall. His face was flushed red. This is some bullshit, he snarled. Right in the middle of a presentation. Do you understand what this means? I had people on that line whose hourly rate costs more than this entire apartment. It's not working for me either, Dad. And my cellular data is dead too. Mom came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. In her eyes was that same high-alert anxiety she usually pulled straight from the news. But now there was no news, and that scared her more than anything. I was just checking the updates. She started, and then stopped. I wanted to check, but everything's gone. The phone just went quiet. We stood there in the hallway, 3 silhouettes in the dusk. Mikey came out last. He didn't yell, he didn't get angry, he just held his tablet like a broken toy. Chris, he called softly, why did the little people in my game freeze? They're just standing there, they're not moving. The first 2 hours we spent in pure denial. It felt like a collective psychosis. We ran around the apartment as if the signal might be hiding in the closet or under the bed. Dad went out onto the balcony 5 times. He held his phone high over his head, as if offering it to some invisible satellite god. Catch it. Come on, catch it, you piece of... he muttered. He looked like a primitive man trying to summon rain during a drought. His dependence on connectivity was physical. His hands started shaking. He kept checking his pockets, pulling his phone out, staring at the black screen, putting it away. Then doing it again, 30 seconds later. Mom started cleaning. That was her defense mechanism against the unknown. She scrubbed shelves that were already clean, constantly glancing at her iPad sitting on the dining table. It's probably the sun, she said, trying to calm herself more than us. A solar flare. I read about it last month. An electromagnetic pulse. We could be without communication for days. We need to check our water supply and canned food. Chris, see how many batteries we've got. I didn't move. I sat on the couch and felt a vacuum forming inside me. My brain, trained on a constant second-by-second stream of information, started overheating from silence. I felt like I'd gone deaf. All the world noise I'd gotten used to filtering vanished, leaving me alone with the scariest conversation partner imaginable, myself. It turned out that, without notifications, I didn't know what to think about. My thoughts were like scraps of unfinished posts. Tonight feels so weird. I wonder what my followers would say if they knew. I kept mentally creating content for an audience that no longer existed. It was insane. Dad, stop pacing, I snapped when he walked past me for the 20th time. You're not changing anything. The whole neighborhood's down. Look out the window. We went to the window. The evening city looked normal, but something in it had shifted. Lights were on, cars moved. but there were too many people outside. Clusters of them stood around staring at their phones, or just looking around, lost. The city had turned into an anthill someone poked with a stick. The connections between the ants had been cut. "This is the end," Dad whispered. "If the network isn't back by morning, markets will crash. Chaos will start." "Don't be dramatic," Mom said, but her voice was shaking. "It's a technical outage. Come to the kitchen. I'll put on the kettle, on the gas." The kitchen became our command center. We sat around the table. In the middle was a single candle. Mom decided we needed to conserve electricity, even though we still had power. But in her head, the internet is down automatically meant civilization is ending. The silence at the table was unbearable. We didn't know how to simply sit together and say nothing. Before, our silence was filled with screens. Now we had to look at each other. I noticed my father's eyelid twitching. I noticed Mom chewing the nail on her thumb, a habit I thought she'd quit before I was even born. We were seeing each other's tiny flaws, the ones usually airbrushed away by the blue glow of monitors. "So what now?" Mikey asked. He sat with his head propped in his hands. His tablet lay beside him, face down. "We just sit here?" "We wait, Mikey," Dad said. "We just wait." "For what?" "For everything to go back to normal." "And what is normal?" Mikey looked at Dad with a seriousness that didn't belong on a child's face. "For you to go back into your office and not come out until midnight? Or for Mom to read bad news again and cry, 'I don't like that normal'?" Dad's head snapped up. "Michael, watch your mouth. We're in a difficult situation." "That's your difficult situation," I exploded. "Your presentation got wrecked. Mikey's game won't load. And he's right. We're sitting here like strangers who just ended up in the same apartment because it started raining." "Chris, don't," Mom pleaded, pressing her hands to her chest. "We need to stick together right now." "We are together, Mom!" I slammed my palm on the table. "Physically. But we don't even know what to talk about." "What are we supposed to talk about if we don't have headlines to discuss?" "The weather? What's for dinner?" Dad looked at me. And for once, his eyes didn't have that usual irritation. They had something else. Confusion. Slowly, he pulled his hands off the table and hid them under it. I don't know," he said quietly. "I really don't know what to talk to you about. I spent so many years making sure you'd have a future that I forgot your present." It was the first honest confession in a decade. The air in the kitchen shifted, like it had thinned. The tension hit its peak when Mikey suddenly stood up and walked out of the room. We assumed he was going to bed, but a minute later he came back dragging a heavy cardboard box. "What's that, Mike?" Mom asked. "I found it in the storage closet. When I was looking for a charger that works, it says family on it." Dad helped him lift the box onto the table. Dust bloomed into the air, dancing in the candlelight. We hadn't opened that box in 7 years. It was like a physical graveyard for our family, back from the time before we fully moved into cloud storage. Dad opened the lid. On top lay an old photo album. A real one. Plastic sleeves. The smell of old paper. He held it like a relic. Then, as he flipped through pages, he froze. "This is our first hike," he whispered. "Chris, you're 5 here. Look at you. So ridiculous in that huge sun hat." I stepped closer. A little boy looked back at me from the photo, mud all over him, absolutely happy. Beside him stood Dad, young, thick hair, no permanent tension in his shoulders, his arm around Mom. They were laughing, and there were no phones in their hands. "I remember that day," Mom said suddenly. Her voice softened. The metallic edge of her anxiety disappeared. "We got lost, and we ran out of water. You, Mark, tried to navigate by the moss on the trees. And we ended up at some beekeeper's place," Dad smiled. "They gave us tea with honey. Chris ate so much honey, he broke out in a rash." "Yeah, I remember," I burst out. "I thought that honey was the best thing in the entire world." We started pulling things out of the box. An old guitar string. My first gouache painting where all the people looked like potatoes. A dried flower Mom brought home from their honeymoon. Each object was a key. Each one unlocked a door into a room of memory we had boarded up with planks made of likes and reposts. We started telling stories, not the kind that fit into 280 characters, the real kind, with details, with pauses, with laughter. "Tell me more," Mikey kept saying, eyes wide. For him, it was like discovering a lost Atlantis. He was seeing us, the real us, for the first time in his life. Dad told stories about his failures at his first job, and we laughed until we cried. It turned out he hadn't always been a successful optimizer. He was human, he messed up, he got scared. Mom talked about how she once dreamed of becoming a landscape designer, before the information noise convinced her the world was too dangerous for dreaming. That night, without a single byte of outside data, we learned more about each other than we had in the last 10 years. We were rebuilding a connection, a real one, a direct heart-to-heart line that doesn't require routers. Mikey fell asleep right at the table, his head on the old album. We carried him to bed. None of us wanted to go to our rooms. We sat out on the balcony wrapped in blankets. The city quieted down. Without neon ads and endless hum, it felt like a huge sleeping animal. "You know," Dad said, staring at the dark silhouettes of buildings, "I'm only realizing now how tired I am. Not from work, from the need to always be on. Like if I fall out of the network for even a minute, I stop existing." "We're all tired," Mom said, resting her head on his shoulder. "We were just afraid to admit it, afraid of silence, because in silence, you can hear time leaving." I listened to them and felt something inside me shifting. My digital fortress didn't seem so important anymore. All those people online whose opinions I treasured, they were shadows. But here, on this cold balcony beside me, were people made of flesh and blood. The only people who would need me if that black screen stayed forever. "What if they turn everything back on tomorrow?" I asked. "Do we become ghosts again?" Dad stayed quiet for a long time. Then he pulled his phone from his pocket and looked at it with something close to disgust. "I don't know, son," he said. "It's a drug, a powerful drug. But now at least I know I have a choice." We sat like that until dawn. We met the sunrise not through a camera for stories, but with our own eyes. It was orange, huge, and completely indifferent to whether we had the internet or not. And then, we heard it. Ding. A short, sharp notification sound from the other room. Then another, and another. The network was back. The world got loud again.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.